So it's a pleasure to be here. I so enjoy this conference because of all the new ideas. And I think this conversation fits right in with the discussion this morning. Obviously, that's how the agenda works. So in continuing this theme of how people move around, transportation, starting with Waze earlier, and then autonomous and connected vehicle discussion that I've only heard a piece of because we were preparing. But in short, I've had the pleasure of working both, as Gordon mentioned, with Miami-Dade County and Carlos specifically, as well as Jannet and the Cubic team. Microsoft works closely with Miami-Dade across everything that Miami-Dade County does in terms of supporting them as a customer, and we see them as one of our most progressive cities that we're working with, and really excited to be partnering really with Carlos and Miami-Dade. Cubic has been a strategic partner for Microsoft for the last several years, and really is teaching us in many ways the ropes of how public transportation systems are implemented from a fair, from that critical fare management standpoint. So what I'd like to do is let both Carlos and Jannet set the context for what we're doing in Miami-Dade. We'll talk about a few of the maybe some more details, than you might hear otherwise about what actually happens when people are working together implementing a transportation system. And then we can open up for some questions. We'll have 10 minutes for questions on the agenda. So Carlos, why don't you start and give us a feel for what's going on in Miami?
Well, good morning. Good morning. I guess I made the mistake of drinking 2 coffees today to try to warm up. As you can think, this is not as the weather that we have down in Miami. Well, my name is Carlos Cruz Casas. I'm an assistant director at the Department of Transportation and Public Works. That's a long name. But basically is what I like to call a mobility management agency. 2 years ago, we started a process of merging traffic engineering, traffic operations, traffic signals and signs, bicycle pedestrian, transit operation, transit planning, transit construction, and even the for-hire regulation for Uber, Lyft, taxis, and limos. So if you think about it, it's basically everything that moves people around, everything on the one department, and that was through the direction of the mayor of Miami-Dade County. Miami-Dade County, for all of you that might not be familiar, is a county of 34 cities. So basically, yes, Miami and Miami Beach, even separate cities, are within Miami-Dade County. And it's an interesting position that we are, because we are the sole provider of transportation and management of traffic control devices. So that put us in a good position for us. Not only we have cities, counties, and state roads and everything in it, but now we have the full jurisdiction between public transportation and transit. And I think the message is that we've learned that public transportation has changed from its definition, that no longer is just bus and rail. We look at it differently. For us, more transit is better transit, and that means bus and rail and everything else that connects people to opportunities with bike share, car share, carpools, and everything along the lines. So we want to put everything into one. We want to make sure that people understand that every vehicle out there can be a transit vehicle, and we need to take advantage of that and advantage of the resources that we have. So some of the things that we're actually changing, our mentality is, we're not on this alone. This is not a public transportation issue. This is far beyond that. This is an environmental issue, a public safety issue, a public health care issue, and a congestion issue. So we need to be solving not alone, but with everyone out there to help us. Because this is really a community-based push that we need to put forward. I'd love to talk a lot more, but I know we're short time.
There's one thing I always quote Carlos on, and it comes through in this. I think that powerful statement that Carlos made to me when we first met was the mission that we have for transportation in Miami-Dade County is to get a citizen to an opportunity. Mm-hmm. We don't care how that happens within the system. So it's connecting all the things that you were just talking about. I think that's.
And to me is I don't care how people get around, and I certainly know that the user doesn't care either, as long as a fully seamless experience and integration of the system. So, and I know that's going to be things we're going to be talking today, and that's one of the reasons that we partner with Cubic and Microsoft in the particular exciting project we have going on. Yeah.
I think that's, thank you and good morning. I think that's an excellent segue to a bit of the background that I'll provide about Cubic. I'm Jannet Walker Ford. I'm the General Manager and Vice President for the Eastern region. of North America for Cubic, where I focus on from Canada to Puerto Rico, and most importantly on Miami, as it relates to revenue management, automated fare collection systems integration. We provide that type of service for our clients all over the world, including London, Brisbane, Atlanta, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and I'm pleased to say just recently we were awarded a contract to modernize the New York MTA system, which is close to $1 billion in value, but we will be modernizing all of the systems that are associated with the New York MTA. And really the footprint or the blueprint for what we're doing in Miami, a lot of those things will also follow. So we are about providing that vehicle, that tool that will enable the traveler, the user, to make the necessary decisions about their travel preferences. We've had a great partnership with Microsoft and have thrilled to have been working with Miami since 2009 when we provided their initial system. We've recently upgraded that system to a cloud platform. They are the first client that we have in North America that's forward-thinking, innovative, that has done that. And that means a lot of things in terms of the growth of Miami, as well as leading the way for the industry, whether it's about PCI or whether it's about compliance security, in terms of credit card security. It's about positioning for growth as we talk about future expansion, whether it's regional expansion, which we'll talk about here a bit later. But it's providing the opportunities for APIs and further integration, whether it's autonomous vehicles one day, as we talked about earlier, or whether it's trolleys, whether it's ports, really the platform that we're working towards so that they can enable that type of technology. So that's a bit about Cubic and a little bit of teaser as to what some of our conversation will be a bit later.
Yes.
Sure.
Thank you.
You know, as you think, as you reflect, both of you talked about all of the connection that you have. I mean, Jannet, you just listed not only all these additional cities, you think of transportation, how fundamental that is to economic development. Every major city that we think of has an excellent transportation system, cities on the rise. But in executing on that transportation system, there's so much connection across the organizations that you guys have to work with. It might be interesting to talk a little bit about how partnerships within the context of Miami-Dade County and work that's Cubic is doing, how do those how does it impact your day in, day out? How does Miami-Dade County, how does that operate within the context of Florida, for example? And how do you solve for those different partners you have to work with?
So it definitely complicates things a bit, right? Yeah. When you're trying to do things and trying to get everyone on the same page. But it is critical, when we talk about those boundaries between Miami-Dade County and Broward County to the north, those lines that we see on the map, when you are on the street, you don't see them. So why should we treat it that way? The same when we have a state street, a county street, or a state right away. So if the customer doesn't feel that that's different, why should we treat it that way? So with that, there are many agencies in Miami-Dade County in South Florida, and the Broward County, Miami-Dade County, and Palm Beach County. They form one of the top 10 mega regions in the nation, and we should be focusing on that. And so our leadership, our mayor of Miami-Dade County has taken to his personal agenda to really push forward and get everyone together. And taking the lead. So one of the first things we did is, instead of fighting and trying to sit on the table and convince, we decided to move forward on our own and start calling them and say, we're gonna take the lead to implement this new cloud-based, account-based system for fare integration, and we want to extend that to you as our partners. Because we do see the need to get everyone on the same page and everyone accessible to the same system, and the need to create a regional mobility solution. That doesn't end there. We have our 2.7 million residents on one day. That far exceeds what other commuters coming from Broward and Palm Beach County. So with that, we need to make sure that we treat every single citizen of Southeast Florida the same way. So I think that's critical for us, and it definitely complicates things a bit, but it's so necessary to get everyone engaged in that matter. Yeah.
And and I want to applaud Miami-Dade for leading the way in two areas. One is the difficulty around governance that you're referring to, and building that trusted environment and the collaborations that allow the county, the city of Miami, and the region to be able to come together and say we need to collaborate to make a system that's accessible to our riders, whether it's in the region, the state of Florida, and who knows, eventually Puerto Rico in terms of a seamless system. So getting past the governance issue and a trusted data platform that Microsoft is providing, for example, is one key piece to it. And some might argue the most challenging piece. I recall 10 years ago having discussions with Miami-Dade and the region, and the conversation around collaborating for a common payment system. It was very, very difficult and combative, to say the least. And just here recently at the American Public Transportation Association in Atlanta, its conference in Atlanta 2 weeks ago, I was part of a conversation where folks from the region were surrounding Miami-Dade's director, Alice Bravo, and Carlos's colleague, and they were chomping at the bit. We can't wait, give it to us, give it to us. We can't wait to integrate with the Miami-Dade system so that our riders can have easy access. And so the part about technology and then is the second piece. Governance, I think, Carlos, I don't know if you'd agree with me, is in some ways the most difficult piece, or governance or collaboration or building those trusted relationships, again, at every level. And then two, the technology solution, which is readily available. So Miami-Dade's building that platform with their back office that we've provided as part of our solution. But what's part of that is also the open payment gateway, which and mobile payment, which Miami-Dade is already doing today, but that leads the way for near-field communication, NFC, contactless credit card payments, pay as you go, pay with whatever method that's in your wallet that you'd like to. That's really the positioning that we're talking about, and that technology is there, and that integration to those other types of modes we're talking about are also part of it. But being able to use I think the lessons learned and the strategies that your mayor and your leadership have used, Carlos, in Miami-Dade to be successful, but what I'm sure has taken more than 10 years to get the folks at the table and to all nod that, hey, there's different ways of getting at this. There's different partnerships available. There's different tracks that we can use to bring the integrators. Well, we're the integrator, but how do we integrate the various folks that are participating in that process?
Certainly, I think you're right. Technology is allowing us to have this conversation, right? So if we were not capable of putting together a completely seamless experience for the user, we would not be able. We didn't have the need to push forward this collaboration. So, but you're right. The fact that that's one of the most difficult things today is how to get everyone together and for one common goal at the end. So yeah, I think I'm excited about the opportunity to talk about the technology being put in place and how all this needs to happen for integrating all the modal transportation. And one of the things that we talk about too is in how the government needs to start changing the policies is we cannot continue to think about private mobility and public mobility separately. Because even though we come up with the best trip planning out there that combines all the different modal transportation in a seamless experience, but then I force you to pay full price for each one of those legs of that trip, that I'm not helping anyone. So one of the things we need to start thinking about is how we think about the payment on the back end, how we continue to look at how we cover those costs so that the customer or the user doesn't get the impact of a fully integrated system, because otherwise they're going to go back to just using one mode. And I think that's the enemy of all of us in here, is just that one particular mode and the limited use that it has, right?
Carlos, should we talk about the evolution? Perhaps there's folks in the audience that may not be familiar with that token, to how we've kind of evolved today and why this is such a significant conversation.
Yeah, I think that'd be really interesting. And I think if the thread that you guys have been on, we talk about this trajectory of how people interact with your system, and then how that system extends way beyond Miami-Dade County, right? So this is the interesting thing. You see this, well, in Miami-Dade County, as you mentioned, how many cities are
34 cities.
So there's 34 cities, and you see this small. I mean, Cuyahoga County mentioned this yesterday when they spoke. This is a typical, this scenario, and I think what Miami-Dade has done well is work to break down these barriers. So it would be great to get into those details, and if we could pull the thread of how the data is influencing, and that's really where the challenges we're up against now are breaking down the silos of data to make.
So I'm going to talk a bit, I guess. Well, yes, Miami-Dade County is 34 cities, even though half of the population is outside of cities. It's a county that's bigger than some states. So when we put that into perspective, we want to have a transit agency to cover the entire county. It's not efficient. So one of the things that we look at is a Brookings Institution. They did a study back in 2012, ranking all metro areas in transit coverage and service. Miami, they ranked number 5 in transit coverage. That only means that you look at a map, you turn on the street layer and the transit layer, and we got that covered. But when you look at the service provided, we ranked number 86. And that's significant because that is captured in the amount of people that live in Miami-Dade County that can reach into a job, typical non-farming job, within 90 minutes or less via transit. And we rank very low. So what we realized, and I think is what we're looking into, is we shouldn't be able, or we shouldn't be forced to cover with good service with the same method the entire county. That's not the definition of equity. That's equality. So if we talk about equity, just go to the most simplistic way of thinking about transportation, which I see it as a one-way trip. And if we fix all the one-way trips, I think we got it covered, right? So, and that's when we realize we can definitely introduce other mode of transportation that are more sensitive to the context of the area. We can start inviting private sector to cover and help us. And at the same time, transit needs to evolve. That doesn't mean that because we run fixed routes on buses and rail, and private sector do on-demand service and other things, that transit needs to continue to do the same thing. That's not the thinking. We need to create the ecosystem of the different mode of transportation and learn from what the customers are telling us. It's not the Ubers and Lyft out there. It's the customer telling us, I want a reliable system that can pick me up near my door and drop me where I need to go. And it has to be seamless in experience. So by doing that, I think we need to evolve transportation and transit to start looking at how we can integrate that technology to buses and then microtransit and the flexible transit that we're going to start testing and introducing to Miami-Dade County, and create a full-blown ecosystem of different options that then we're able to cover, like I said, those trips.
Yeah.
So.
One of the things that related to what you're saying about decision-making, and I'm paraphrasing, preference for travelers, why there's congestion, why are folks choosing not to ride transit or to use public transportation when it's very congested and there's traffic for a long time. One of the pilots that we're working with Miami-Dade on, along with our partners at Microsoft and City Innovate, is to be able, and Miami's ideal to do this because they have responsibility for public works, which includes traffic and streets, as well as the transit systems, but to look across those disparate sources of data, if you will, and provide a business intelligence type platform so that you can, the county can really see what's happening from a traffic management perspective, what's impacting perhaps traffic, what's impacting, is the train late, is the bus late, why is a particular station that we're looking at experiencing that should be a very high ridership, have ridership numbers, why are they experiencing such a low ridership number, or why is a common topic within the transportation space, bus ridership declining, what are the factors around that? And so one of the objectives of that study is to better understand why we're not seeing more ridership at that particular should be a highly used location, and doing it by looking at the data platform, taking a look at analytics and understanding, kind of some predictability around that, so that then Miami-Dade can start solving for that. So let's address some of those issues, right, as a result of this pilot.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we continue to plan for transit, with transit data, we are going to be stuck, because that's only the people currently using transit. So that's why we need other partners out there, both in the public and private areas, to start coming together and utilizing the data. And I think we heard it today, and I think that was more eloquent that I can actually say it from Thais this morning. She said, from data to insights to actions. That is really the key. The cities, they don't need data. The cities need insights and information in order to take action. So that's something that we're trying to put together, is get all this information in one place and start deriving the value of the data by combining them with different sources in order to make better decisions. Data should not be an output, but actually the heart of the decision that we need to make moving forward.
Yes, yes.
So we have about 10 minutes left, and I want to, we certainly want to make time for any questions. So if anybody wants to step up to the microphone, I can't, okay, I can see that side. So please feel free to raise a hand or step up to the microphone and ask a question. So another thought, continue, I guess going a little bit deeper, what Jannet mentioned earlier, and we were chatting. I've had this opinion that the world has moved to smartphones.
Yes.
And that we don't that mobile payments. There's no reason to not design a system now that is just a mobile payment-based system. So whenever I started on that, it obviously leads to a lot of problems, and social equity is the first thing that comes to surface. I'd love for you to comment from your business point of view and what Cubic sees and what Miami-Dade sees, and how and where that falls.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, look, when prior to my life at Cubic, I worked directly for a transit system in Atlanta, the Metropolitan Atlanta Transportation Authority, as the Chief Information Officer initially, and then the Deputy CEO. And look, that was 12 years ago, and we were focused at that time, and I'll get to that social equity piece, on modernizing the system. And smart card technology was what we were implementing at that point, so that you could have a seamless travel within the region using a single smart card. It wasn't a credit card. We were moving away from tokens and moving away from magnetic stripes to smart card technology. And the same issues around governance and all of that existed. Those barriers were there. But we were thinking about what was needed right then, right? That was really our focus at that time. How do we meet the needs? How do we replicate the system, but removing cash from the system and going away from, again, tokens and that sort of thing? Well, now we are talking about absolutely and doing, not just talking. It's not just a vision. And it was a vision then to get to mobile usage. It was a vision then to get to contactless credit cards. That is actuality. We're talking about what the future is going to hold and how we provide those options to the users. Mobile phones, people may not have credit cards. We talk about the unbanked community, but mobile phone usage is high. And the focus in the county of Miami-Dade County, city of Atlanta, Philadelphia, in my experience, and many other cities, has been then about how do you ensure that there's access to then the internet and Wi-Fi and hotspots, because that is really one of the barriers to, we can provide all the technology that we want to out there, but if the users, the transit dependent folks particularly, as well as those folks that we're trying to bring over to the other side, relieve some of that congestion from the city highways and the state highways, then we're going to have to make sure that we collaborate with the private sector around providing that type of availability.
But you're right, and I know we have a question, but it's funny that we mentioned and we talk about mobile phones, because today that's at least I use it for.
Yeah.
I barely use it to call someone. It's basically our mobile device that we use to carry our life for everything
That's
else,
right?
right?
That's
So
right.
why treat transportation differently than we treat ordering food, that we take for payment of services and other components? But yeah. So.
That's right.
Please. A question.
Good morning. Bill Leedy, the Leedy Foundation, Alaska. I think all of us in the room are aware of the looming disruption of sea level rise. Miami is perhaps the poster child that will be most soon afflicted by that. NOAA, for example, predicts 2 meters in sea level rise by 2100. How is Miami planning for that, and how should we in this room be planning for that? Building off the previous panel, should we change the conversation from worrying about the legacy transportation system we have based on the private auto and move to something entirely different, so that Cleveland will be welcoming to the internally displaced people fleeing sea level rise in Miami? But today, this decade, how do you plan? How do you even think about that? Thank you.
We are one of the 100 cities from Rockefeller. It's an interesting approach from Miami-Dade County, City of Miami Beach, which is our 2 separate cities. And even I joke around, and no hard feelings, guys. Even LeBron James, when he came down, said he was going to take the talent to South Beach. It's a different city, right? But no hard feelings there. I know it's all good. But we have a plan. We're definitely moving forward. And the way is, in terms of many things, we need to start changing how we use fossil fuels and how we become more sustainable in order to slow down a little bit. But if we tie it back to what we're talking here today, what we're talking is to really create a foundation that is future-proof, right? It is what we're trying to come up with, a mobility as a service foundation that allows to integrate any new future transportation modes. And for example, we're going to be launching over the next year or so a water transportation service connecting the beaches into downtown Miami. We're working on hardening our infrastructure and many other components. Raising the entire Miami area is almost impossible, but we're definitely addressing that in some areas. Today, get flooded with the king tides. Imagine what we to get all those things coming in. But I think the idea is, it's coming. We need to address it. I think we need to start changing the way we move around and not driving alone. I barely see people just driving boats all over the place, but I think it's a good opportunity for us to rethink how we move around and take more advantage of the ecosystem that we have in place. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes. Hello, I'm Wayne Mesker, and I'm Advocacy Director for the Alive Inside Foundation. Our foundation originally focused on working with the demographic of people with Alzheimer's and dementia, but we've moved into the areas of promoting and trying to develop communities where people can age in place better. Florida is already a retiree destination, and how are you addressing issues of people with cognitive problems and technological challenges and mobility problems in your plan?
Mm-hmm. So we also have our paratransit system, which is called the Special Transportation Services. It's part of our portfolio. We treated and we're using technology to help them be part of the solution, right? Currently is a dial-in method that you call in for your ride. We introduce a web system that parents or family members or even program managers can actually book those travels. And with QVIC, we were able back a couple of years ago to introduce a long-range near-field communication. So that way they don't even have to tap their car and they can just walk into the system. In terms of the digital divide, that's something valid and very critical. Our approach is we need to start educating the population that we have on how to use this new technologies coming in place. I think that's our approach. We need to start making our system more sensitive to their needs. And that's what I said, we need more options out there, because having them walking half a mile to a transit stop is not appropriate, right? So I think some of the things we need to start looking forward to integrate. Yeah.
I am so glad you asked that question. My colleague Boris is probably jumping out of his seat about this. QVIC is spending a lot of time with Miami-Dade, but as a whole, in trying to constantly improve in this area. We recently did a focus group in Boston that addresses specifically the types of cognitive type challenges that you've talked about. And that is, we've invited folks to, we got the approvals and all that, participate in the usage of ticket vending machines. So whether it was Alzheimer's, it was visual impairments, the whole gamut, we were able to observe, record how they were interacting with the ticket vending machine, as well as what that experience was trying to get through a gate. And until you really see it or watch, observe, you may not be sensitive to someone in a wheelchair that's trying to get through a gate and tap a card, right? So Carlos is talking about how do we provide the technology that doesn't require that you roll through and that you've got to physically tap. So you get into gateless, we've got a gateless gates solution that's coming out that has really, don't have time to get into today, but it's technology that really kind of is built more on AI type features in terms of awareness of who's in the system. But we are absolutely, for the sake of time, focused on getting better all the time at ensuring that there's accessibility and there's equity, if you will, social equity with the way that we use the system. And we're doing that by getting out in the community, observing, focus groups, lots of questions, and we are then evolving and maturing our systems based on the needs of that community. So it's, I wish we had time to show the video. It's fascinating, but we've taken away a lot of lessons learned from that and incorporated that in Miami as well as in our future systems.
Great, thanks. I think we're right at the time limit right now, so thank you very much. I've really enjoyed the conversation here from you guys.